Hello and welcome to the Stories with Sash podcast, a podcast in which we try and solve motoring-related queries and other bits and pieces as well. Now, on this edition of the Stories with Sash podcast, it's actually quite a little bit different to normal because I've got two guests on, not the normal Mike and Rob as one may have become used to, but I've got two guys that I've known for a very, 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 very long time since primary school, both petrol heads, both car nuts. So I welcome both Andy and Ollie to the channel. Welcome, chaps. How are we?
We're good.
Yeah, good.
We're good.
We had a bit of some tech troubles earlier, but I think we've just about solved them all right. So thanks to the power of technology, mobile phones, the internet, we're on a roll. We're on a roll. Well, yeah. So I mean, I'll kind of go straight into it really, but just to give a little bit of context to the viewers or listeners listening, is that how I know these chaps, as I mentioned, is through primary school, and it hasn't really become apparent until the later years, and until, if I'm honest, in the past couple years really, in which we sort of have bonded a little bit closer due to our passion of cars. And just to talk a little bit about you, Andy, just for a moment, is that I think our relationship kind of got rekindled because if it wasn't for you, and I'm not trying to big you up here, but if it wasn't for you, my beloved little Fiat Cinquecento, which I have mentioned a few times on this podcast and channel, wouldn't be back on the road. And that's primarily because you have been very handy with a welder, which is something that prior to that I knew nothing about. I'm not going to claim that I know anything about it still, but I know a little bit more than what I did. But it got through an MOT, and like I say, it's we did spend a lot of time, and we can maybe talk about that a little bit later on in the podcast really. So I mean, I think it's fair to say, as I mentioned, chaps, you're big into cars. So would you just like to tell the listeners what cars do you currently have, and maybe a little bit about your car history as well? Because I think this signifies the true petrolhead, because neither of you own just one car, because that would be silly, you know. And I'm in the same category as well. So just, one by one, just run us through what you've got, what you're doing, and maybe a little bit about your car history as well.
I'm going to Ollie start that one.
Oh, okay. So my current car, my daily car is my touring, which is the BMW E46 330i touring, in a lovely granddad spec, wooden interior, cream. It's really up. It's really me basically.
Automatic as well, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, proper cruiser, granddad spec. Yeah. I like it. I like it.
It is, honestly. So surprisingly, for a 330, it's very economical for a 3 litre.
Yeah. What year is that again?
It's 2001, so it's a facelift. So it has all the reinforcements in the back of the rear subframe, because the pre-facelift were known to cracking because there was too much torque in the engine, and they knew that, and they never bothered to fix it apart from we're just going to add it in the pre-facelift. So,
right.
The facelift, sorry.
Yeah. Well, it's funny you should mention, actually, because the guy that I normally have on this podcast, and he's probably listening in when this comes out, he's got a 330 Coupe CI. Yeah. A similar sort of era as well, and he absolutely loves it. And he's actually, I think, kind of in the market for an estate car as well. And I think he kind of wants exactly a 330 estate. So E46 specifically as well.
They are, I must admit, they are pretty. They're getting rarer now.
They are.
They are, like mine. I did a little bit of research a few months ago, and it turns out mine is the last facelift 330i left in the I think it's the last one,
from 2001.
From 2001, that's the one.
Really? Wow.
Left on the road. So yeah. So
wow.
So I'm trying to take my very best to look after it. It is.
And how many miles is it on now? Just out of curiosity.
In all honesty, about 154,800 and something or other.
Wow. But barely run in for a 330.
Barely run in for a 330.
Yeah, that's not touching anything.
That's nothing. And then my project.
Oh, I think I've lost you.
Oh, can you hear me now?
I think we cracked up a bit there. Yeah, I can hear you now. It's all right. Cool. We'll just edit that out. That's fine.
Okay, cool.
So
Pop you over again.
Exactly. Just edit it out. So yeah, no, barely run in for a 330. So I've seen it and I actually quite like it.
Yeah, it's really nice. I must admit, it's got bison on headlights. It's for me, it's sort of like the cross between like an quote unquote outdated car, but also it's still quite modern.
It's got the modern features.
It's
in
got
an old
modern
car.
features in like in a classic car. I mean, I'm that type of person who will never own a modern car. I find them incredibly boring. To be honest. There's too much stuff going on. Like at the moment, I'm borrowing my dad's new BMW 320d G20 model, which is like the brand new estate.
Right.
And it's got so many buttons and it's just so confusing. And
the Starship Enterprise was
is
less complicated than the
yeah,
new one.
yeah, it honestly is. There's so many buttons for everything. It's just ridiculous. So I honestly just prefer older cars. I mean,
I completely relate.
Relate. My project car, which I've owned for about 6 months, and I've driven it in a grand total of about 5 miles.
Right.
You've driven it about 6 feet.
6 feet. Okay, 6 feet. Okay, 6 feet. Is another E46, but it's the compact. It's the 318 Ti with the variable valve and all that gubbins.
Right. Yep. And I've been following this project, and you've done some extensive stuff to it.
Yes. So I bought it for a grand total of 180 quid.
Wow.
Yeah.
180 quid. That's a bargain.
Yeah. So apparently it was a non-runner.
Yeah.
Right.
Apparently with a solenoid issue. Turns out, and a timing chain issue. Because those engines are known for either the timing chain to snap or the timing chain guards to crack.
Right.
And people just say you might as well just buy a new engine because it's cheaper to get it fixed. So the guy sold it to me for 180 quid as a non-runner. It at its time it wasn't automatic, so I took the 330 touring and I drove it all the way to Weisbeck, which is it's like 3 hours away.
Right.
So I did a 6-hour round trip in the touring with manual transmission, prop shafts, just everything.
Yeah.
You need for a conversion in the back of an estate. It was amazing down the motorway. But yeah, I mean, it's at the moment the compact will be my first drift car because I've always wanted to learn how to drift. I like modifying cars. I like tinkering with cars.
Well, the long, loving journeys to go get them.
Yeah.
Failing to mention that it was a 550-mile round trip to go and collect that compact.
Okay, yes, it was a 500-mile round
Hang
trip.
on, so if I remember correctly, chaps, this is the one that was down sort of Cornwall, Devon way.
This was Cornwall,
it was in Newquay,
Newquay, yeah.
And you guys went during the first lockdown, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
First few days, yes.
Yeah.
Of the lockdown. This is the whole debacle, which maybe we can go into later about the tow truck being weighed and stuff like that. Yeah. That's a good story. So that was so basically you went down in that truck and you went all the way down to pick it up, picked it up, and then drove all the way back.
Yep.
Yes.
Wow. That is a long way. So yeah, okay. So you said this is your first project car, drift car, and I think it's fair to say, although correct me if I'm wrong, like when it comes to cars with you. Cars, I think, am I right in saying that they're kind of a recent relative love of yours, or have you always been into it? I mean, what's the story?
I think it starts from when I've always liked cars. I've always grown up with cars, and I thought for a very long time, I thought, what's the point of learning? I'm not going to be very good at it. What's the point of building anything? I'm not going to enjoy it. And then after speaking to Andy and all of our other friends and seeing them enjoying their cars, and me learning, because I learned to drive only a couple years ago. So it was only till then I thought I actually want to get into cars. My dad has always had cars. I mean, he had he had an Opel Manta, the GT.
Oh, nice.
All white. So it was all white. Everything was white.
Wow.
Yes. It was. I've seen some pictures of that, and also looking back at his photos of him with his friends in his like driving. I remember he was saying these just road trips to Belgium or to Germany in their cars, just for like a long weekend, and they would go and just drive for a few days, go to a hotel, have a bit of a party, and then spend a weekend in wherever, and then come back home for a weekend, and that was it. And I thought, actually, that sounds amazing. And also, speaking of, like, I must admit, me and my dad, when we were younger, never really had like a proper like we never really bonded over. And I think after getting working on cars and working with him, talking about it, we've started to bond like a lot more.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, and I mean that's why I like cars. So, so yeah, back to the compact. The compact, like I said, was an auto. It's now a manual, which me and Andy spent how many weeks? 3-4 weeks? About a month.
There was a few weeks waiting for parts.
Yeah.
A few little bits here and there that had been missed in the overall collection of things like
Yeah.
clips and stuff that are very difficult to find nowadays sometimes.
Yeah. So we spent probably about a good month and a half plodding along during the first lockdown.
In the rain.
In the rain, in the sun. Just doing a manual conversion.
I was gonna say, like, that sounds like, I mean, maybe not this time, but it sounds like a tricky job. I mean, I've certainly not done anything like that before, but having now done it, thoughts on it? Would you recommend it? Would you say I mean, I don't. When I say easy, I mean easy in inverted commas, but is it quite a hard job?
It would have been easier if we had the right parts.
And given the situation at the time, which I'm sure we'll get into later, about me and Ollie both having very similarly busted shoulders, mine being quite more recent, it kind of slowed us down at the time. I was still recovering. But having said that, I think with the right tools and a ramp and the equipment, it is quite achievable for most people who know a well-adhered mechanic.
Yeah. I wouldn't say it's for a beginner.
Definitely
not for a beginner. Because,
No.
because I must admit, like, I've only been modifying cars for about a year now.
Yeah.
Kind of.
Yeah.
On and off. I mean, like, when I say modifying, I don't mean like full-on engine conversions and coil.
No.
I mean like so my first car, for example, was an E36, 4-part automatic. I bought it just so I could because it was an E36 and it was cheap. And I basically changed all the interior to M Sport leather. It was a saloon, so I bits and pieces like that. But it's sort of like, the compact is where I've actually dived to modifying cars, basically.
Right. And if I'm right in saying, so are those the only 2 cars in your ownership at the moment?
In my ownership, yes.
Right.
There is going to be more.
Yeah. I mean, they're always, yeah, that's the
There's
beauty.
always going to be more.
Anything that you know for certain now that's in the horizon, or?
I really want, I really want a 4x4.
Oh, okay, that's interesting because I've been tempted by one of them as well. What sort of 4x4?
So I was thinking something like a Suzuki Vitara or a Suzuki Jimny.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I rate the Jimny.
Yeah, see.
The Jimny is an incredible car. I know it's a bit hit and miss with people, but I think the Jimny is such a plucky little 4x4.
It is. Andy here is shaking his head in disgust. He's not impressed.
I can imagine him not necessarily approving of the of the Jimny. Well, okay, I suppose, Andy, what about you then? Tell us a little bit, because there's something in common with you guys when you tell the viewers or listeners what your current collection of cars are.
Yeah, well, after the crash back in December last year, it came pretty apparent that for a while it was going to be automatics only just to get me about, and I figured I wanted luxury. So I equally matched the granddad spec of Olly's 3 Series, but with an E39 5 Series.
Good choice.
Yes, 1998 2.8 straight six, silkiest automatic gearbox ever.
It's fucking. It's
Granddad
beautiful.
spec wood trims, granddad spec leather, all of the accessories and extras you could probably think of for that time. The oldest style of xenon projectors that blind everyone, but it's fine because it's not me. And it's not failed to put anything I've wanted to get in the back in it.
No,
it's been the most silkiest, smoothest drive. I think we've loaded it up once after loading up Olly's 3 Series, and we had the seats down in Olly's 3 Series, putting it all in, and then we put it into mine, and it fit in the boot with the parcel shelf still in.
Wow.
It's another level of boot space.
Yeah, they are like. If I honestly didn't have the E46, I would definitely go for an E39 touring. Just
yes, you bought a hatchback. Is what you bought.
I have. In grand things, comparing it to your E39, it is definitely a hatchback.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, I have to say, my dad had an E39 for a bit. It wasn't the touring, it was the saloon, but I absolutely love that shape of 5 Series.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
I think the E39 is a classic, like, definitely. And we can go on. I mean, there's a lot of BMW talk here, but I have to say that they're all good choices. So obviously you've got that, that's automatic. That gets you about nice comfort, space.
It's the comfortable, economic, reliable.
How many miles has that got, dare I ask? That must be.
That has now just tipped over 181,000 miles.
Wow.
And honestly, you still can't tell that it's on when it's running.
Really?
With the right amount of servicing and making sure you service it at the correct intervals, those will see happily 250,000 miles and keep going past that.
No, I fully believe that because I've seen them in the past go for mega miles. Barely run in at 181k for 528. So
demonstration model.
I have to say, it's just on a last note on E39. What I love about the E39s, and I think a lot of people maybe listening to this can relate, is I love the breadth of engines that they came in those E39s, and the fact that you could get them. I know they're rare, but I know you can get the 540, the 545. Obviously, you had the M5 at the top of the range, but you could get them in manuals. I know they're rare.
Yeah.
Yes,
you can.
Yeah.
But that's incredible. I absolutely love that. I think they're great cars. Absolutely love them. So you've got that as kind of safe to say probably your daily now. Your run around. Get your comfort, space, all that. And besides that, you've got I imagine at least 2 cars now, if I'm right in saying. Besides that,
So Olly followed me down the E46 line of the drift car scene. My project that is, to be honest, a never-ending project.
As all project cars are.
Started out in life as a plain as day 318 coupe. Nothing interesting, nothing exciting. I had a few little bits on it, but pretty much bog standard. It's currently now sitting outside as a 2.5 6-pot conversion. And I think the only standard bits on it still are the gearbox and the diff.
Wow.
Yeah. Everything else has been swapped, changed, replaced, or upgraded, if I remember rightly. So much so that I'm losing track.
Yeah.
Wow.
A labour of love, definitely, because most people would have lost their rag with it by now, to be honest.
How long have you had it for now? You've had it for quite some time.
That's got to have been easily 4 years now.
Wow.
And for the route that we go down with the drifting and stuff, it's basically abuse. It's pushing the car's mechanicals to the limit, and you have to be patient and persevere with them for that sort of thing.
It sounds silly, but 4 years is quite a long time. It's quite a large lifespan for a drift car.
Yes, I'm surprised the subframe hasn't ripped out yet, because I am yet to do that.
Because of course yours is a pre-facelift, isn't it?
Yes, and it wasn't an issue when it was a 318. With the extra power and obviously the sideways torsional stress on the chassis, it's definitely something I'm going to be doing in the next year.
Right. Is it a difficult job? I can't imagine it's not too bad replacing a subframe, because
there are plenty of walkthroughs online that will show you. There are 2 options. You can epoxy the new plates together. It's been tried and tested, although I don't think I'd recommend it because it is essentially just gluing it together, and I'd never quite trust that. The other option is welding. Anyone who is confident with a welder can do it. Give them on a driveway. I would give yourself a week because you need to get the whole rear end down, fuel tank out, all that sort of thing. But once again, even not possible, it's probably a weekend work, couple of days work for a garage.
Right.
Albeit I'm not entirely sure what they would charge for that.
No.
Job, but
Probably a lot. But
honestly,
okay.
unless you had like an M3, or if you're going to use it track days and that sort of thing, it's not something to be concerned about on the road too much. It's more of a sideways stress and a torsional stress of hard cornering.
Right. Okay.
It depends what you're partial to.
Right. So that's kind of your project car, your ongoing project car. And besides that, you've recently acquired something that's quite close to my heart as well. Would you like to tell the viewers what you've got?
So recently came into possession of a 2003 Saab 9.3 turbo convertible.
Wow, good choice, good man. You know, I mean, I'm all for BMWs, but the Saab. I mean, I'm not going to lie, I was quite surprised when you messaged me saying you got one, because I didn't necessarily see you as a Saab. How did this come about? I mean, why, how, when? I mean, I'm just a bit confused, if I'm honest. I just wasn't expecting it. I've always just seen you as a BMW man through and through, you know.
It seems to vary. I mean, in general, just as the age goes on, you tend to get more. You sort of like all cars
Curious?
in general. Yeah, you just sort of like all of them. But this one was a specific opportunity that came on our laps, to be honest. Me and Olly were sort of looking around. Thought we'd have give it a bit of a go wheeler dealing, see if we could find something that just required a little bit of love that we could give it, and sort of give it a new lease of life. And nothing was really coming up during the conditions, and obviously everyone wants to get as much money as they can at the moment due to lockdown, and obviously that's understandable. And we were doing a smoke test on my E46 outside, and this guy from the other side of where I live just walked over and offered us some tyres that we can use for skidding. And it turned out he was in possession of a few vehicles, and this particular Saab was on its route to the crusher, and we've saved it, basically.
Wow. Wow.
And it's one of those slightly different eccentric cars. It's very you. I definitely have to say, you do like the cars that have certain
quirks.
Yeah, quirks about them.
Yeah, so yours is a 2-litre turbo, isn't it?
It is.
2-litre turbo convertible, because I've got mine's a slightly later, but it's still a 9.3. It's an estate, because I think all petrol heads have an estate, because estates are just the best.
It's the easiest way to get car parts.
Honestly,
Exactly. You know, you can never have estates they just serve so much. They do stuff so well.
They do.
Yeah,
they're very versatile.
But so have you is this like, from what I'm gathering, a kind of a relatively quick flip in the future? Or
it was supposed to be, but it's now becoming more of a labour of love.
Right.
It was, and you'll probably be quite familiar with this, owning a Saab as well. There is a notorious steering lock failure that happens on Saabs, especially in the earlier models, and the steering fault goes wrong because they have the electro keys rather than actual blade. And they tend to fire it off, and then basically you can't turn the steering lock off, you can't start the engine, it just goes dead. This had happened to this particular one, so the guy was just going to scrap it as he hasn't got the time to sort it out. And we were just going to try and get it working and then move her on, but Saabs have a weird way of growing on you.
Yeah, they really do.
And I think, to be honest, it'd be rather nice to get it back up to full glory before giving it to a no owner, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, they're great. I mean, to be fair, I have to say, and I'm quite curious. I've never so my one is a diesel, actually. It's not a petrol, but
CIDs.
Well, mine's actually the twin turbo. I must point out, it's the TTID.
Sorry.
Yeah, it's a rare beast, actually. They didn't do many of the twins.
No.
They're not that many. 180 brake horsepower. It does go. But yeah, I've never actually driven a petrol Saab, actually. So I would be quite curious. But am I right in saying, is your one or your guys' one, like, do you have to lock the car in reverse to take the key out, or is it can you leave it in neutral? Because the earlier Saabs, I don't know whether it was just on the 9.5s, but the 9.3, I know on the 9.5s you had to do that, but I didn't know about the 9.3s, the earlier ones.
it still works in conjunction. I mean, the key obviously isn't held in by a mechanical blade as such anymore, but it is recommended there is an electromagnetic field that holds it in the first place, and you are meant to put it in reverse. For the project we have at the moment, the key doesn't have to do that because we've got a bit of a bodge at the moment because we had to get it from one side of the car park to the other. So we've got a temperamental thing in place at the moment just so we can get it moved.
Right.
But it does still have that, and they can't seem to get rid of their fighter jet heritage. There's always something they have to keep.
And just, I suppose, maybe the final point on the Saab, 2 points actually, is how good is the cup holder?
They both still work.
So hang on, has yours got the two of the flippy ones, like the weird ones, or is it just one of the flippy ones with one of the ones in the middle?
We have the one flip and the one in the middle.
Yeah, same as mine. Same as mine. And finally, the night panel button. Please tell me you've tried it.
We have the night panel button, yes.
Exactly. And how good is it?
If you ever want to do a bombing run down the street, then that's exactly what you need to press. Yeah. There's no other reason for that apart from the light blinding you. Somehow your cluster blinds you.
Yes, exactly.
No, it's a weird quirk, and it's something that Saab owners probably tend to love quite a lot.
I absolutely love it. I think it's great. I love the holder, and I love the night panel button. It's just and Saab seats are. I don't know what you all want, but I find mine incredibly comfortable. I mean, it's a comfortable car to sit in. Actually,
they are very, very plush leather.
They are very nice.
And looking through the windscreen, you can kind of tell. I mean, BMWs in a general tend to be quite. You have a good radius of view outside because they're made generically for businessmen and all that sort of thing. But with Saab and along with Volvo and their massive attention to safety, you can just see how strong and big the A-pillars are.
Mm-hmm.
You can definitely sense the build quality because for a large car, I mean, the Saabs aren't small.
No.
They still, although they're slightly smaller inside than BMWs, but you can just sense the strength around you that it doesn't. It's a small offset to pay for the amount of safety you get in them.
No, honestly, I'm really happy that you guys are liking your Saab because I do think they're the slightly different choice, and they're obviously Saabs aren't made anymore, and they are becoming a little bit more of a rarer sight on the road, certainly compared to Volvos and so on. So that's really good. So I kind of want to. You haven't got any more, have you? That's all you've got at the moment, car wise.
We got a few more in the horizon. There's a van and there's some motorbikes in the future, but we're holding still right now until the other side of Christmas, I think.
Yeah. Do you know what? I mean, we can go into great lengths about this. Maybe not on this podcast, but we can chat offline perhaps because I've got a lot of potential ideas, and I'm not sure where to go with it as well.
Yeah.
So I mean, obviously working well. I mean, we could touch upon this briefly. Obviously, working on cars, it is a labour of love, and obviously, a car is a big object, sort of thing. So, the biggest enemy of the car lover or the car who personally wants to work on it is space. Really, isn't it? I think I'm right in saying space is really, because cars, unlike motorbikes, that they are big things, right? So you've got, if I'm right in saying, Andy, you've now got a garage that you have access to behind your flat, isn't it? Is that where you've got the is that where you do your stuff on your E46 and Saab and so on, or is that the other one that you've got sort of the other way in Shoreham Lancing way?
I've tried, but I'm now overflowing 2 garages and a shed.
Wait, what do you mean? 2 garages in the same complex behind your flat?
No, I've got the one in Shoreham, which is currently overflowing with spare car parts and Ollie's car.
Right.
I've got a garage-sized shed in another family residence that's also overflowing with parts and tools. And then the one down here, which did originally store the BMW, now doesn't, because the sad truth of the matter is now, obviously, cars have got bigger and the garages made to accommodate them haven't.
Right.
So the garages we own today and what people have on the side of their houses and that were all made for a time when Mini Coopers and Morris Oxfords were the car of size, and they're about the same size as a Renault Clio now. So
yeah, no, it is tricky, isn't it?
Done outside. Yes.
Well, as I spoke about online, I'm coming into obtaining a garage in the next month, 6 weeks or so, which I'm very excited about. So we can talk a bit more about that as well. But that is the big problem. It's finding space, and having somewhere dry is quite helpful.
Yeah.
It's
dry and warm.
Dry and warm in the winter is definitely we had struggles anyway, didn't we, when we were doing my car
in my rainy season.
It's not a good time to start a project car in January, February time,
No.
especially if you need to do body work. Not a good idea.
Especially not an Italian car.
No, definitely not an Italian car. What I want to kind of talk about is, obviously, you guys have already alluded to with your cars and sort of drifting and so on. And I think it's fair to say, we've gleaned already, that you guys are quite into modifying your car, customizing, whatever term you want to revolve around. Now, this is something, and I know we've spoken about it before, that I've never really cottoned on to. I like, personally, originality in cars. I quite like older cars that maybe have been fitted with more modern tech and kit, like a more modern engine. But fundamentally, from the outside, you wouldn't really be able to tell. I mean, unless you look at the brakes, and you might see the bigger discs and calipers. But those are subtleties. So what is it exactly about the whole? And this might feed in nicely with the drift sort of thing. What is it about? What's the appeal? How did this come about? I mean, because I just don't understand. And maybe it's just because of the different interests that we have, and maybe the different magazines and so on. But how did it come about, really? Because I'm really intrigued by this, and I know literally nothing about it.
Okay. So where the question is, where do you want to start?
Well, I mean, why? I know it's a personal. I suppose it's personal taste, but why modify your car in the first place? Because so let me just tell you quickly the way I look at it. It's that car manufacturers, particularly the big German ones and so on, they spend millions, if not billions of pounds, developing a car to be as good as what it's meant to be in terms of purpose. My argument is, and I'm not saying it's right, and I'm not saying this is the case all the time, but what makes people think that they can improve it? And I'm not saying this is a rhetorical, well, not necessarily a rhetorical question, but I'm interested to see your views on it. Do you see where I'm coming from with this?
Yeah. We do. The wording in which what you've said is fairly correct. Obviously, companies and manufacturers spend billions of pounds developing and making their models. But they don't make them to the best. They make them to the best compromise. Now, bearing in mind all of these, you go to a BMW dealership, for example, there'll be a line of 3 series. All right, they might all have different levels of trim and equipment, but fundamentally, they've all had to come down to the same thing. They have to be drivable for every sort of person. And that then depends whether that's a teenager, whether that's your great-grandmother, if she's still here. That could be your mum going to the shops or your dad going to work. It has to be the best compromise for everyone to keep everyone happy. And the Americans have caught on to this quite well because their aftermarket scene is huge. But potentially car enthusiasts, they see it as another opportunity to express their own personalities.
I think that's a fair. I mean, I think you've summarised that quite well, actually, and it's not necessarily something that I've thought about in that way. And I think you've already just touched upon it. The Americans are huge into customizing. Right. I mean, obviously, I know it's a bigger country and so on and so forth, but the customizing scene is sort of spreading across the world. You know, even I read a report the other day or whatever in a magazine, like Korea is getting big into modifying, and it's a huge industry. I didn't really appreciate how big it is.
So, interesting. It is really huge. Like, even like Japan, I've seen the last 40, well, I'd say about 40 to 30 years have really grown the modifications. Like, they even essentially have charity shops specifically catered for people who modify their cars. You could go and buy perfectly second-hand goods. Essentially, they essentially have like a Halfords who sells second-hand modified car parts.
Wow.
Yeah. For instead of paying like 300, 400 quid for a turbo, you could pay like £200, half price.
Wow. So, because this is the thing about modifying cars, and I'm not making any presumptions here, but obviously people modify their cars. I think it goes. Am I right in saying it goes in a little bit of a cycle per se, in terms of, so say you want to upgrade your car, and say you want, I don't know, I'm taking a really basic example here, but just say you want to like upgrade your suspension and lower it, and then you put some new brakes or what have you on it, and maybe that's the most that you can afford at the time, right? And you buy those bits and you think, yeah, this is nice, and then maybe, I don't know, a year or two down the line you see something that's better and that you can afford, and it's a little bit more money, and you go to the sort of the next level up, and maybe you sort of chop and change the bits on your car. Does that tend to has that happened to you guys? Is that how it works? I mean, because obviously
pretty much all of modifying works on a budget at some point, because to be honest, the quality of parts and the broad variety, there's always something that you just physically can't afford. So it does just end up cycling from what you start to what you build. I mean, Americans have got so much more money to do this, and things are a bit cheaper over there. This country has to conform to a degree.
There's so many, honestly, we don't realise how many laws we have that basically negate modifiers. When I say modifiers, I mean people who like modifying cars. There's so many laws we have to conform to, so therefore our cycle and our parts we want, our pond is really small.
And when you do find a loophole, they soon patch it up.
Yeah.
If we find something new that's new into the scene of modifying, like many years ago, there was Christmas lights. There's cars driving around at Christmas with all the Christmas lights outside the cars. That's now been banned because it was too distracting.
They haven't. The thing is, they don't say you can't drive with Christmas lights on. They say you can't drive with cars with green lights, red lights, blue lights.
Yeah, right. I'm with you. So it makes it more, incredibly more difficult.
We are talking like the Fast and Furious kind of routes here. There is a lot of modifying that can be done without having to look like Vin Diesel driving down the road. But
popping off every second.
Wheeling his Charger. There are plenty of options before that, but as far as the extremes that we like to go to there is quite a few restrictions in this country.
Yeah, right. I'm with you, and I know, again, like we've kind of maybe touched upon it before, but I mean, it's difficult. It's difficult for somebody who's not into modifying to really distinguish, if I'm honest with you. But there must be like so many, I'm going to call them categories or types of modification that varies compared to, people differently. Or am I right in saying that?
I wouldn't say it's a category. It's some would say it's even a culture, a subculture. It's more like a way of life. It sounds really cliche, but modifiers sort of, or people who like to modify, take things very seriously and to heart. Like the car, like Andy said, it sort of like shows their personality, and it is an extension of themselves essentially. You can tell people's personalities by looking at people's cars and even at how people modify them and stuff like that.
It's a great talking point too.
It is. It really is a great talking point.
They might have had a car that you, like a previous family member, has had, and they've modified it up, and then you can get talking about that particular car. And you, rather than knowing them as the friend, you'll know them as the friend with this car and such and such, and you can see them on the roads. It's just more community.
No, I'm with you.
But sorry, back to you. I'm saying about like different categories and subcultures. There's loads of categories and subcategories. Like you could take, for example, hot rod with American cars, and for example, like originally that was basically, if I remember correctly, the history behind that was basically bootleggers wanted cars that could drive across county lines, going incredibly fast back in Prohibition time. And so that's where it came from, essentially building like a sleeperish looking car that could outperform a police car. So for them to look, the paintwork looks looks brand new. It's essentially a restored car. But then you've got a subculture which is called rat rodding, which is like have you heard of like rat look cars?
Yeah, no, I've heard of them. It's just where basically you make them look kind of worn out and beaten up a little bit.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm with you.
rat rods are basically hot rodded American cars with the rat look style, which are chopped windows, chopped frames, essentially cars that might have actually been stitched together.
Mother Nature spent 40 years making it look that way. Why change it?
Yeah,
essentially.
Yeah.
No, that's really interesting, and I think you guys have. So obviously,
you got a crackle.
Hello.
It's what's
there we go.
But you obviously see a lot of. Oh, can you hear me?
We lost a lot of crackle there. Yeah.
No, that's all right. But what I was saying is, obviously the media maybe points out about like boy races and so on, and all of these like car meets and sort of people where they congregate together, and talk about their cars. And I think if I'm right in saying like, and I did again. We've sort of spoken about it a little bit before offline. Is more like this sort of thing can get quite personal and a little bit nasty by the sounds of some of the stories that you guys have told me before.
Yes.
Is there quite a lot of? Is there like gangs per se? I mean, how does this?
I wouldn't say gangs. It's just people. People are very opinionated.
Yeah.
And people, like I said, these cars, our our prized possessions. They're essentially like. It sounds really bad, but I'm going to compare it to a child. They're essentially our baby. And so if somebody says, and people can be very blunt. So if somebody says, for example, like with camber and with there's too much camber in the stance community. So within the stance community, you have people who are static, which are just on coilovers, who are low, basically just slammed on the floor pretty much 24/7. And you've got people on air ride, which is air suspension. They can change height whenever they want to. It's just people like between those two sort of like categories. It is very toxic. Like for example, people with static cars will see people with air ride as sort of pretentious and sort of like they think they're better than everyone else, but they're really not. Where people would think, and then people with air ride will see people with static cars saying, "Oh, why are they doing that to such a nice car? You're just ruining it. Think of all the parts you're going to ruin and this subframe and all this." Or basically, excuse my French here, but it is just all bollocks.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. Because really, people should just be like you just said. It's an extension of your personality, and really, it shouldn't make a difference whether somebody wants to use coilovers or air suspension. Obviously, everyone's entitled to their opinion of what maybe they would have done. But
this is why we try to appreciate the classic cars more, and like you said, the eccentric cars, the cars that are, say, now over 30 years old, because the atmosphere around those sort of cars tends to be a lot different. It's a lot. I can't think of the word now.
It's a lot more relaxed.
Yeah,
it's a lot less toxic.
Everyone accepts what everyone else has done.
Everyone is accepting, and I would say, but the things like majority of people who like to modify cars, I would say it's majority of them keep themselves quiet, are actually generally quite friendly, but it's the small people with the biggest voices which make which ruin it for everybody. Like you were talking about car meets and people meeting and how it's essentially sort of frowned upon because you have a small amount of people who just want to show off, which they have fine. That's fine to do it, but it's like a time and a place.
Yeah.
No, it's no good showing off in front of hundreds of people in a massive car park where there's CCTV, people with their phones out, videoing you, pretty much collecting evidence while there's police. Because obviously bystanders, when they see a lot of cars and congregate with young people, they assume that we're all dealing drugs pretty much.
Yeah. No, I'm with you.
And
there's always a bad bunch of every sort of type of person or whatever there is being.
Exactly.
What's picked up more, the media only picks up on the boy racers, and they don't pick up on the 300 people that sat there and were not causing an issue.
Who were just having a chat.
No, I completely appreciate where you're coming from on that. So, in terms of you guys, then, so of course you've already sort of spoken about it before, but you guys, am I right in saying you're very much into the drift scene? Is that kind of the way that you're going with both your cars, or you tell me? I mean, have I interpreted that wrong?
No, well, I mean, for me personally, it started off with the drift scene, but I'd say within the last year or so, I've started to appreciate and I want to learn about the different quote unquote scenes or categories because every car is built differently and for a different purpose. There's categories and stuff. So, I mean,
we've chosen the drift route, I think, generally because you'll always see cars of basic modifications, and there's quite a few stance cars already out. There's not a lot that hasn't been done. Drifting is the only one of the such which is sort of a sport that almost everyone can do. If it comes to building a track car, it's great. If you can keep it road legal, then great. But obviously the track days, you can do. But if you wanted to go into racing, you have to get a license. It gets a bit expensive that way. Drifting, there's a lot more variation for drifting. There's a lot more areas, although it doesn't sound it, depending on how much you want to risk any damages. But it's probably an easier entry sport to have an adrenaline rush.
Oh yeah.
As opposed to track days and so on in a track car. Right. Okay. I'm with you. I didn't really think about it in that way. And of course, I mean, you guys already sort of had your path determined a little bit because you both bought BMWs. So, they are the ultimate, if you want an affordable rear wheel drive car, there's only really two. You either buy a BMW or you buy a Mazda MX-5. Those are kind of the only two.
We don't talk about Mazdas, MX-5s.
I
know Andy isn't a particular fan of them. I did have one for a little bit, but I had to get rid of it sadly.
I gritted my teeth while talking to you. Yeah.
You did, yeah. You weren't very very happy about it, but that's fine. We don't have to talk about the M word.
The M word, like that one.
Yeah, we don't have to. So. Really, I mean, obviously, I suppose. Well, firstly, have you guys? I mean, maybe I know. Obviously, Ollie, you're a bit more recent to this, but Andy, have you partaken in any drift events or anything yet? Or because I know, obviously, this year's probably been a bit difficult with everything going on and so on. So,
yeah, it is pretty much due to this year. There was loads of events set up. And as you can imagine, the further through the year, more and more got cancelled. And so far now, everything this year has been cancelled. And some of the early stuff next year is still on sort of a seesaw of if it's going to go forward or not. Some people got out to a few drift days. The events as such, not so much. But on the flip side, that's just given us more build time and just more time to find sponsors if we can and get our cars set up for next year. And I'm sure with next year, everyone's going to hit it a lot harder.
Yeah.
Right.
No, I'm with you. Yeah, because that's what I was going to say, really, for you guys, in terms of, like, next steps then. I mean, I know, obviously, you can never necessarily define an end point, but, like, how far are both of your cars, say, drift ready, in inverted commas? Like, are they nearly there? Have you still got a long way to go?
Well...
Two different stages here,
yeah. So I'm with mine, because I bought mine in May, and I was like, realistically, there's no point me rushing it because I want it because I'm very new to cars and modifying. I want to just research as much as I can, absorb a bunch of information, and then actually know what I'm talking about and actually do it myself.
Yeah.
So I'm actually essentially I'm in no rush.
Yeah,
I'm generally a very relaxed person. So if it gets done this year, it gets done. As long as I get done by, I would say, October, which is the first drift day. Usually happens in the middle of October, end of October, give or take. As long as I get it 50% and it's driftable, that's a word. Then that's fine. I mean, for me, my car hasn't actually done much since the manual conversion.
Right.
Because of lots of stuff has happened. Like my E46 has basically needed a lot of welding, to the body essentially, which Andy did a fantastic job on it. I must admit, and lots of issues with my car. Like I need a new power steering pump. Just loads of new, just random stuff.
20-year-old cars need
20-year-old cars.
Yeah, it's
yeah.
wear and tear, isn't
Wear
it? I
and
mean,
tear, just
it
general
gets
like maintenance stuff, like, and so that's
exactly.
sort of like taken up my time,
Mm-hmm.
and like especially with like my job, yeah, I don't earn. I mean, I earn enough money to survive, but I don't earn enough money to thrive. Essentially, does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I'm with you. Yeah, that makes sense.
I've had to sort of think realistically that there's no point me rushing into it because I will have no money at the end of it. I need to like build up essentially the money for the car so I can do it.
Start
Having
working
a car
on
or
it.
a hobby will fast
Yeah.
deplete your finances.
Yeah.
Like most hobbies, there's always further to go.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So my car pretty much hasn't really done much since the manual conversion, but between like that time and this time, we've broken sold a BMW E36, which was a fantastic.
Oh God, I remember this. Yeah,
Oh.
yeah.
Never, word of advice: if you ever think about breaking cars, don't bother.
Yeah.
Just don't.
No.
Just don't. It does not make you any money. The amount of people who ask you to send flipping doors to Manchester for 50 quid, including postage, the amount of people, it's ridiculous.
Yeah. I'm
No.
completely with you on that.
No.
Yeah. So actually, I've got just a question before we move on to Andy for you, Ollie. So how much? Just out of curiosity, how much do you reckon that manual conversion cost you? Like, obviously, just in terms of parts. Obviously, I know the labour.
I would say it cost me just the parts alone, just shy of 200 quid.
Okay.
So it's not the manual conversion itself, money wise, is not expensive. It's more like time.
It's all the labour, isn't it? Yeah, the time.
And time.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, like, if I remember correctly, I think it costs me. No, it cost me about 200 quid. 50, 60 quid for fuel to get up to wherever I picked it from up north. And then I think it was about 150 quid or 160 quid for the whole conversion kit.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean,
that's not too bad.
It was surprisingly, it was probably I think a manual conversion is probably the cheapest ever modification you're going to do to a car.
Well, and I know in BMWs they're not. I think in other cars they can be a little bit more tricky, but I think in BMWs they're quite well set up for it.
I mean, they really are just literally just bolt on, bolt off.
Yeah.
Change the coding, and that's pretty much it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I sit here and say, it's just a bit of coding. Coding itself. I mean, coding cars, which I've started to really enjoy, is a very, very, very. It's like one of those like Russian egg dolls. It just keeps on going. Like it's
not for the amateur mechanic.
It's not. I would say it's not very. It's not. I wouldn't say it's not for the amateur mechanic, but I would say you would need a little bit of knowledge to know exactly what you're doing.
I completely get where you're coming from. I mean, personally, coding and that sort of thing is a mystery to me. It's not really my cup of tea, but no, I can completely see where you're coming from on that. No, it's just a bit of a curiosity thing for me, actually, because like I said, I've never actually known anyone to actually do a transmission conversion myself, so that's why I was interested. But sorry, slight digression, but what I want to say, so Andy, going back to you then, in terms of your car and drifting ability, is yours probably a bit further down the line, obviously, than Ollie's? Are you ready to go? Is it raring, or have you still got a few bits left?
So, as far as drifting is concerned, to be honest, even with the standard car, you could say it was drift ready. In a way, a skilled enough person could get it to drift constantly. There's things that we like to do to make it better at the drift angles and stuff, and it's one of those things where, yes, it's ready. You could take it out and do it now. But me, and obviously the want for more, there's always more parts to do, more parts to put on.
It's not ready for you.
Yeah. It's not up to your standard.
Yeah. So, I mean, I've got the engine, I've got the diff, I've done all my suspension, my geometry, and some of my chassis stiffening. But there's always more, and the curiosity keeps going. So the latest part is, I wonder how much boost I can put through it before it will blow up. So now we're looking at turbo fitment and
okay, yeah.
see what we can get from the engine that way.
Well, actually, no, this is really interesting because I'm gonna have to get the guy that one of the guys that I normally do this podcast with, Mike. He's very much very interested in this. I mean, he's a huge BMW fan. And it'd be good to get you guys to have a chat actually, because I think it'll make quite interesting conversation. But so I think what I was going to say, and I know we've discussed it as well before, is that whenever we're allowed to actually do anything again with our lives in the outside world, I'd be really curious to actually come to one of these events. And I know we've spoken about it before, so as soon as anything becomes available, let me know. Because it would be good to sort of see this thing in action, because I'm just curious myself, really, and it'd be good to sort of see this. Now, I want to ask, this is just questions popped into my head as we've been speaking for the past however long. So specifically, BMW 3 Series, right?
Mm-hmm.
What model of 3 Series, as in E40 whatever or E30, is the best 3 Series that's ever been made to date?
Okay,
we can ruffle some feathers now.
So
I'm intrigued. I want to know.
For me personally, it's either I would say it's either E36 or E46. I mean, it depends how you look at it. E46 is fantastic because you have all the they have all the technology pretty much and comfort, and there's loads of parts, but for modifying, there's not so many parts, for example, as an E36. So there is now loads being produced, but I'd say 4 or 5 years ago, there wasn't many.
Right.
And also E46s now are the E36s, and the fact is that prices are still remaining low, so they're becoming more affordable.
But not for much longer.
But not for much longer, like Andy just said. But like I said, about for what you want, E46s are pretty good. However, if you don't want to be dealing with like the whole camber system and the whole all the technology and all the gubbins, and you just really want to learn about a car and how a car functions, like the basics, like I did, is an E36.
Right. Okay. That's interesting to hear. What about your thoughts, Andy? Is that coherent with that?
Is this best model of all time?
I wouldn't say best model. I think best model for someone who, like me, who has never started with a car.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you could look. Yeah, I mean, I'd be interested to know from the perspective about working on cars, but also in general, like, what do you think is the best? And we'll get on to I want to talk quickly about M cars quickly, but Andy, do you share the same thoughts as Olly with that sort of view?
I do, but I'm naturally a little bit biased towards 5 Series models, so E34s in particular, just because
E34 over an E39.
I would specifically because some of the old. I mean, the E39 is great; it does everything you need it to. But obviously, there are some bits because some bits travel over from 36s. However, if you wanted to learn the basics and get to grips, the older E34s have a simpler setup. Some of the old diesel engines are purely just mechanical. There's no electronics, so you can't worry about spiking an ECU or messing up.
Yeah,
and it teaches you the principles a lot easier.
I'm with you. I have to say, I've
a better talking point.
Yeah, I never used to be a massive fan of the way the E34 looked, but they've grown on me in recent years.
They really do.
I think they look quite like they've got that cool retro look about them. I do like them. I still think on balance I'd take an E39, but I like the E34, and I completely get what you've just said about that. So, quickly as well, because you spiked my interest, M cars, right? Yeah. Now I'm guessing. Do you guys like? I'm guessing you guys must love an M car, surely, or what's the view on the M cars?
So
I won't go to specific ones yet, but let's talk about your classics like your M3s, your M5s, that sort of thing.
Okay, so E30. So out of all the M3 series, I would say probably the E30s.
Oh,
Just because of the body shape.
I mean,
they came factory with a freaking wide body. I mean,
yeah.
The Evos,
especially the Evos. Like and they're a lot more iconic.
Agreed. They look great.
Left hookers.
Yeah,
and they are very iconic BMW.
Yeah, I mean, and
I
must admit, I don't really like E46 M3s.
Oh,
that's
controversial.
I
sort of agree with him.
I find them incredibly they're just sort of like they're just honestly I don't know what it is.
They're great cars,
but
everyone knows of a blip in the noughties where, let's say, Fast and Furious and Max Power reached their peak, and I thought the E46 just had too many curves and not enough lines.
Yeah, exactly.
If that makes sense.
To me, an E46 M3 does not look aggressive.
No.
As compared to the E36, the 30s.
That's interesting.
And their gearboxes were always riddled with problems. The SMG setup just didn't work.
It just doesn't work.
No, I agree with you on the SMG front. Although the manuals weren't too bad to my knowledge.
They weren't. The manuals were good.
I mean, if I remember correctly, did they? I can't quote me if wrong. Did they come with 5-speed or 6-speed? The M3s, because they were pre-facelift. So I think it was only.
They were so rare that you could never really know.
If I remember correctly, it was only a 5-speed gearbox.
I honestly don't know off the top of my head. I think the later ones might have been a 6-speed, but certainly the early ones, I imagine they were 5.
I must admit, also, I don't really like pre-facelift E46s.
Agreed. I prefer post-facelift, but yeah.
They just
you both have no taste.
They just look really tired.
Yeah, no.
They just look.
I sort of disagree with that, because if you get an old pre-facelift 330 Club Sport,
I know, but they're rare.
They're rare, but there is a certain look about them. But I feel like the M3s were just a bit soft. In 46, they weren't. They didn't have the slingshot aggression.
Yeah.
I agree. I see entirely where you guys are coming from. I mean, for me, I'm not the biggest BMW fan in the world, but I am interested in BMWs, and I do quite like their M cars. I mean, I think you'd have to be a fool not to like the M car BMWs, but D46, in my view, as an all-rounder, has got to be the best M3. But crucially, I know we could go on about this for ages, but crucially, I have to say something. It's not the M car that I would choose overall.
No, it's not.
I would go for, and I'd be interested to know your thing, E39 M5.
Yeah.
That would be my ultimate M car. Somebody said you had to have an M car. What's that?
It has to be an LCI one, the slightly later models.
Yeah.
I'm a novice. What's the difference?
So it's the light conversion. It's essentially the earlier M5s didn't have the halo rings.
They didn't.
They had halo
rings. They had basically silly
They had all the recalls and everything done, and they had a few more. So that the headlights have been upgraded. They were better. Some of the interior trims were upgraded. Some of the extra features were added on.
Right.
And all the gremlins have basically been ironed out.
Right.
It had a slightly more aggressive look as well. And it was the first initial car, although people remember it as the E60. The E39 had an option for coding in the orange side markers on the front.
Okay.
With European cars, because E46s over here, if you just try and code it normally, you can't actually, in theory, code the ECU to have USDM marker lights. You have to actually download the file, put it in, or you can just wire switches in. But unlike Andy said, that they actually had it already pre-programmed into the ECU.
Right. Okay. I'm with you.
And I think
the later ones are projectors as well.
And they're projectors, and they're just
proper projectors.
Yeah, they're not like.
No, I think that's interesting. I was just curious. That's all. I know we sidetracked slightly, but I just love the fact that E39 M5 was manual, 4.9 litre V8. I saw one recently at a flat that I was looking at, and it was in a very dark green colour
forest fern green, or it could be Boston green,
something like that, and it had like a dark tan leather into it. Oh, it was beautiful.
That sounds like the Alpina green, but I forgot what it's called.
Clean E39 M5 has aged well.
Yeah, and they really do. E39 M5s age really well.
They look better than pre-facelift E60s at the moment.
Yeah, 110%. I mean, I really do think E60s look really. If you put them close to an E39 or like an E46, to me, some people would, if they don't know their cars at all, would probably think that E60 looks pretty outdated.
I would agree. E60, if I'm right in saying that was the one after the E39.
Yeah, first one with the V10.
Yeah,
V10, yeah. Now that I'm curious. I actually that engine alone is interesting. They didn't work very well. They do have a tendency to blow up. I think their rod bed, what is it? Their rod bearings or something go on them, or tend to go. And it's a shame that in Europe we only got the terrible gearbox with it. They did do manuals, but only in the US.
Yeah.
Which is a bit of a.
The US had lower power figures.
They did. They had with the whole California state, whatever it was. Where
you got the smog test, haven't you? I think over there or something.
There's some stuff like the power ratio because it was only one state. They thought it would actually it'd be more cost effective to basically make all the cars for California essentially, or like San Francisco, or like so.
Okay, I'm with you.
They basically handicapped the engines in the car.
I wasn't aware of that.
So, like for example, the E36 M3 in America is, I think it's like 30 or 20 brake horsepower lower than the M3 over here.
Right.
Because of, like I said, because of the whole California or the state debacle or something. It's really stupid. And like so, in actual theory, it's actually no quicker than buying a 328 in America.
Really?
Yeah, it works out like it's only 20 brake, but like 20 or 50, like between like 10 or 20 brake horsepower, I believe. Don't quote me. I can't remember.
No, that's interesting. That's interesting. Well, I think we have digressed slightly, but I was just curious to know, as BMW enthusiasts, what your take was on that. So thank you for sharing that with me and the listeners. And I think this is probably a good point to wrap things up, really. But I have to say, chaps, it's been a joy talking to you, and it's been really, really interesting for me as somebody who doesn't really know a lot about. I like to think I'm well versed in cars, but kind of more specific areas than others. And this is something I know literally nothing about. So it was good to get your thoughts on. And
we don't know anything either.
No, we don't.
Well,
I think that's the beauty of modifying cars is because it's such like I wouldn't say niche, but it's sort of like.
There's plenty to learn.
It's so small, but it's such like a small sort of like hobby essentially. But it goes into a rabbit hole. You could learn about lowering springs, and you could end up 6 months later buying a wide body kit and sticking a turbo or just it's a minefield but it's beautiful, to be honest.
No. I was going to say it sounds very interesting, and it's good to learn about these things and how varied it is and everything like that. So, yes, well, like I say, chaps, thank you very much for coming on the podcast. And I hope you guys have enjoyed it. Hopefully, again, maybe in the future we can get you guys back on again and talk about other bits.
Not enough time.
I know, that's the thing. I mean, I could let this last for about 3 hours, I'm pretty sure, quite easily. But to make it a bit more bite-sized chunks for the listeners, we'll sort of break it up at this point. So like I say, chaps, thank you very much for coming on. This concludes this episode of the Stories with Sash podcast. And I'll put some outro music right about now and see you again soon.